So Angry Joe had a Grand Theft Auto video copyright claim because of Sony issuing a copyright claim on his Grand Theft Auto 6 video, right? And he was angry. He came out seething. He was so angry. Like, oh, how could they do this to us? I give you free advertising for the best-selling game of 2026. Free advertising they don't need, by the way. I do all this for you, and this is how you treat me. Like his typical song and dance, which we really do need to start calling out for being completely wrong. By the way, nobody cares about what YouTubers say. Nobody goes to YouTubers to learn about upcoming games, right? They're not marketers. They're just leeches. They're grifters, right? But this has always been Angry Joe's take is that I give you free advertising. Oh, it's a cope, right? Like he's just a parasite, but this has always been his angle. So he comes out, makes this video about Grand Theft Auto, and what does he do? He edits it and reposts it to his channel, right? To avoid the copyright takedowns. Now, this is really, really interesting to me as a Nintendo fan because, as you know, Angry Joe's claim as to why he doesn't cover Nintendo content is because they copyright claim all of his content. Now, never mind the fact that this doesn't seem to happen to anyone else. I'm a YouTuber who uses Nintendo content all the time and never have any issues. Never mind the fact that nothing he says about this makes any sense and doesn't match up to the experience of anybody else has ever had in regards to this kind of thing. Never mind the fact that he has an entire kind of video where he just sits down with other Joe and Alex in a sit down review and review movies and stuff with no footage, right? Never mind all the ways, all the alternative ways they could talk about Nintendo products. No, he will just lie to your face and tell you that he can't play Nintendo games because of copyright takedowns, while doing everything in his power to keep the Grand Theft Auto videos up on his channel, even though they've been copyright claimed. Now, this is interesting to me because this is, I think, another example of just Angry Joe being a complete and total hypocrite because the Nintendo thing has nothing to do with Joe being copyright claimed. It has nothing to do with Nintendo or anything they're doing. The issue is that Joe just doesn't play video games. He doesn't know anything about Nintendo, and so would really struggle making content about these games that wouldn't make himself look like a complete idiot, Again, he really parroted that narrative when Tears of the Kingdom came out. Oh, it's the exact same game as Breath of the Wild, even though he had no problem coming out and covering God of War Ragnarok. He came out and tried to do this thing where it's just the same game again. And it's just so out of touch with what the game actually is, what how people actually feel about it. His entire job is to review and cover games. And this idea that he would skip out on Nintendo's major release for that year because oh, I heard that it was the same as the last one. That's completely laughable and completely stupid for a YouTuber to do. He has an active agenda to not cover Nintendo content, to not talk about them at all, unless he absolutely has to downplay them in some way, shape, or form. The way he scenes about the Mario movie is a really good example. The way he complains about Switch 2 and the pricing and stuff like that. You're not gonna hear a peep out of this guy. Now that Xbox has raised their prices, maybe he did that thing that everyone else did where they tried to blame Nintendo for it, but he's not gonna blame Microsoft for this. He's not gonna get upset at Microsoft, his main benefactor, for raising their prices, because like he makes money off of covering games. There's no the price isn't really an issue for him. But that's exactly my point. When looking at all of his issues with Nintendo, where he does the stereotypical thing of just like, I'm not interested in that. That's not appealing to me. I don't care about that. It it just makes himself look like he just doesn't know anything about video games at all. Because I've said this for a long time. Like, if you're not interested in anything on Nintendo consoles, it just means that you don't like video games. I have a very hard time believing that Joe would not enjoy Metroid Prime 4, right? Considering his sensibilities and what he enjoys, like this idea that like Metroid wouldn't be appealing to him is like laughable to me. But like he always bends over backwards to not talk about the franchise, not talk about the IP, not talk about like everything they're doing with that. Like he just ignores it and pretends it's not real. He ignores the Switch 2 and pretends it's not real. And I do think that it does need to be talked about more, that just how insane it is that so many major gaming YouTubers are still trying to not cover Nintendo at all in 2025, when they are the market leader, when they are the only developer that's going to survive the oncoming gaming crash, when they're putting out a brand new console that plenty of people are excited for. The reality is people like Angry Joe would rather simp over Grand Theft Auto 6 instead. Like that's the reality of it. They just want to grift off the Grand Theft Auto name. They want to get those views. They want to get the income. They want to get those subs, right? But the reality of the situation is Switch 2 is going to be bigger than Grand Theft Auto 6. The reality is there are a handful, quite a few, Nintendo franchises that are bigger than Grand Theft Auto now, and that number is just going to keep growing all the time. It's simply not going to be sustainable to keep ignoring Nintendo games going forward. This very well may be the last mainline Grand Theft Auto game we get in Angry Joe's career. Like, is he really going to keep doing this in his 50s? Is he going to have like any credibility at that point? Like, I certainly don't think so. So, with that being said, with Grand Theft Auto 6 is a really interesting video game to me, because I think this is kind of the last stand, I've been calling it, of like the traditional gaming journalism outlets. Like this idea that Grand Theft Auto is like some icon of the PlayStation console industry and it stands at the precipice of gaming. I don't think that narrative is going to survive the release of Grand Theft Auto 6. I think a lot of people are going to be upset by this. I think the game isn't going to be all that great. And Angry Joe, much like he did for Grand Theft Auto 5 and Grand Theft Auto 4, is going to be running damage control for it. So I do think it's very important. We talked about this right out of the gate, is that no matter how bad Grand Theft Auto 6 actually is, people like Angry Joe are going to simp for it, even if they issue copyright claims against their videos.